Holly Williams. With the rise of information technology, online comments have become a regular part of daily life. Every minute, people across the globe share their thoughts in various ways. Some leave remarks on photos or posts, while others review books or movies. Feedback on services has become especially widespread, particularly in fields like cosmetology, hairdressing, construction, retail, and healthcare. You've likely read or written such comments yourself. These reviews often reveal the nature and quality of a service. But the criminal case you're about to read defies expectations in startling ways. In this story, irrationality meets madness. And the most shocking detail is that the person who ordered the crime actually left a glowing review online after the deed was done. That careless move proved to be his undoing, ultimately helping investigators crack the case. It all began on March 12, 2020, on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee. That day, a construction worker stumbled upon a chilling scene. The bodies of 33-year-old Holly Williams and her ex-boyfriend, 36-year-old William Lanway, inside a white 2005 Acura sedan. The man immediately alerted emergency services and reported what he had found. When first responders arrived, they confirmed that the couple had been shot. No one could have anticipated that the investigation, which would stretch over 3 years, would uncover a web of secrets and expose numerous dark truths. But in the end, justice would be served. The perpetrators would be caught and held accountable, and their downfall would stand as a cautionary tale. Holly Williams was born on January 14, 1987, in Nashville. Friends described her in different ways. Some saw her as gentle and reserved, while others noted her as independent and strong-willed. From a young age, Holly was drawn to beauty, whether in people or the world around her. She had a natural appreciation for aesthetics and aspired to work in the beauty industry. Her dreams became reality. In mid-2017, she graduated from the Georgia Career Institute in Murfreesboro, and by September, she had officially earned her cosmetologist license. Holly eventually launched her own business, Shine Aesthetics, which focused on makeup services, grooming treatments, and eyelash extensions. She was not only the owner but also the face of the salon, always polished, attractive, and approachable. According to a friend, Holly was exceptionally talented at her craft. She attracted many admirers, but her heart belonged to an eccentric man named William Lanway. Their relationship was tumultuous and unpredictable. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. William was infatuated with Holly, often wooing her with charm and grand romantic gestures. However, his expressions of love frequently gave way to jealousy and heated arguments. Over time, it became clear that William was a manipulative person who knew exactly how to apologize and keep the cycle of emotional highs and lows going. He relied on typical tactics, apologizing, offering flowers and gifts, making promises to change. Despite everything, Holly kept returning to the toxic relationship. William's unstable behavior was later attributed to a troubled childhood and unresolved trauma from his first marriage. However, this does not justify his actions in later life. Bill Lanway. William Lanway, better known as Bill, was born on March 17, 1983 in Clarksville, Montgomery County, Tennessee. The boy spent his first years in the love of his mother and the rest of his relatives. Later, however, a terrible tragedy occurred. At the age of 26, Candy Kay, William's mother, died. At that time, he was 3.5 years old. It is known that her husband, who stabbed his wife almost in front of his son, was responsible for the young woman's untimely departure. Before that, Lanway threatened to shoot himself and William if his mother did not return on time from the store. Perhaps the man had mental problems or was violently jealous of his wife and lost control of himself. Either way, this event left an indelible mark on Bill. Subsequently, his upbringing was taken up by the closest relatives. He grew up with proper care and protection. In 20 years, the young man married Dana Rucker. 3 years later, the spouses had a long-awaited daughter. Madison Kay did not know the misfortune that her father experienced. The couple adored their daughter, showering her with love and affection. But once again, fate dealt a cruel blow. Their little girl was diagnosed with brain cancer, a devastating illness. Despite every effort, the treatments failed, and on September 21st, 2011, Madison passed away, becoming, in her parents' words, an angel. Chada Lanway was shattered by the loss, and the emotional toll on both parents was immense. Over time, the marriage unraveled under the weight of grief, and the couple eventually divorced. Billy sank into a deep depression, becoming withdrawn and emotionally distant. Though he tried to maintain a calm exterior, he occasionally suffered from emotional breakdowns and bouts of anger. He eventually found solace in his work as a mechanic, which friends said helped lift him from his lowest point. But the person who finally pulled him out of that darkness was a new woman who entered his life. For a time, it seemed like life had taken a turn for the better for Bill when he met Holly Williams. His outgoing personality helped him make connections easily, especially in social settings like parties or bars, where he came across as lively and engaging. The two were instantly drawn to each other and soon began dating. In the beginning, their relationship was joyful and full of shared moments. But over time, the harmony faded. Bill began initiating arguments and eventually became physically abusive toward Holly. When she started to see the danger and considered leaving, Bill used emotional manipulation, especially by invoking memories of his late daughter, to guilt her into staying. Holly, out of empathy, continued trying to support him, but everyone's patience has limits. Her growing resolve to escape the toxic relationship only enraged Bill further. He responded to conflict with violence, escalating each situation with aggression. Holly, now genuinely fearful for her life, reached her breaking point after one particularly violent altercation, one that would ultimately become the turning point. When Williams returned from work, she found her favorite dog without signs of life. Until that moment, the health of the pet was not in doubt. Therefore, despite the fact that the boyfriend denied his involvement, she decided that it was his doing. Thus, he took revenge on her and threatened her for the future. After that, the young people finally parted. Nevertheless, Bill did not leave her alone, calling and stalking her. On one such day between them, there was another altercation which ended in a showdown in the police. Bill was arrested for aggravated assault as well as kidnapping. Holly got a restraining order against him. However, just a week later, the two were found dead. An accident or a double murder? To a random eyewitness who called the emergency services, it seemed that the car found was involved in a traffic accident. The vehicle was at a construction site in the southwest part of the city. It had apparently rolled onto the curb and hit a tree. The reporting party believed that the people inside were injured in the accident. However, that was not what actually happened. Police noted that the man and woman were in the back seat in an unnatural position. In addition, the couple had gunshot wounds. The marks that were found in the passenger compartment were uncharacteristic of a typical impact in a collision. Also, the victims had no identification or personal belongings on them. When the victims were identified, it came as a surprise to law enforcement officers that they were dealing with a couple that had recently been in police reports. Versions. The first theory put forward by detectives was a crime of passion. It was assumed that Bill killed Holly and then ended his life. However, soon this version was excluded. When communicating with the close entourage of the couple confirmed that in recent months, the relationship between them was really heated. Holly even installed reinforced locks and CCTV cameras in the house. When reviewing the footage, it was found that Bill had come to her house more than once, wandering around looking for something. But what he was doing it for was unclear. However, such behavior spoke of the man's fixation and unwillingness to let go of the past. Later found witnesses who claimed that they saw the couple in the evening of March 11th calmly talking to each other. No aggression at the same time. Bill was not noted. Perhaps their relationship was experiencing a new round, or they decided to keep friendly communication. In any case, the initial assumption of the investigators was dispelled. No murder weapon was found during the examination of the vehicle. If the man killed the woman and then committed suicide, where did the gun go? At the same time, the forensic results established that Bill could not have inflicted such wounds on himself, and every bullet fired was fatal. It looked like someone who knew how to handle firearms was at work. Things like cell phone, documents, and money were found in everyone's house, which means their trip wasn't a long or planned one. Holly and Bill may have been victims of kidnapping and murder. One thing is clear: they were murdered, then stuffed inside the car, and then pushed off the side of the road. A third person wanted to stage the accident to cover up another crime, but he didn't do it properly, maybe in a hurry. At the same time, no evidence or fingerprints were found in the car. The investigation suggested another version of what happened was revenge. After the detectives talked to the relatives of the victims, it turned out that because of the fiery temper, Bill has not once got into trouble. It's possible that he had ill-wishers and enemies, and his behavior could have provoked someone to retaliate. But even that hardly explained the death of his ex-girlfriend. She was the complete opposite, calm and peaceful, but at the same time could have been an unwanted witness to something. Investigation. In search of the perpetrator, recent contacts of the victims were studied. The contents of mobile devices and laptops were analyzed. Curious information came to light. The same number was listed in the messengers of both. However, it was not possible to check it at once, which only heightened suspicions. Such numbers are usually used to conceal identity and are often associated with bad purposes. However, this method is not 100% secret because it leaves a trace that can be detected by an experienced programmer. To identify the owner of the number, the authorities had to turn to the specialists of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In parallel, there was a study of CCTV footage from Holly's house. It turned out that shortly before the tragic events, 3 unknown men broke into her home. All were thoroughly prepared, dressed in black clothes, faces hidden under a mask. It was unclear what they were looking for, as they did not take anything with them. It is worth noting that there were many valuable things in the woman's house. The intruders carefully examined the house, studied it. When they found one of the cameras, they tried to disconnect it. However, apparently they were not afraid of being caught and were confident in their impunity. After they left, returned from work, she noticed the stranger's presence and became very frightened. She barricaded the doors overnight and changed the lock the next day. Poor thing was trying to protect herself. But from whom and for what reason? Detectives had doubts about the woman's identity. Perhaps her fears were unfounded and she was being threatened. However, what could Holly be involved in? Detectives decided to delve into her line of work and discovered the following. Layla Love. The beauty parlor wasn't Holly's only source of income. No, she was not engaged in substance trafficking or smuggling. From the age of 18, the girl worked part-time as an escort. It was there that she earned a lot of money as she served VIP clients and personal business was used as a hobby, as well as a cover and concealment of income. In the intimate sphere, Holly was known as Layla Love and dealt only with wealthy men. Others couldn't afford her. Holly's duties included different services: escorting to events, massage, striptease, or passionate night. It must be said that she had quite a large client base. Her bright appearance attracted men, and they were ready to do anything for the time spent with her next to her. During this period, she earned a large sum and ensured a trouble-free life. At the same time, gained a lot of envious people, persecutors, and enemies. The fact is that the woman did not particularly hide her second profession. Of course, she did not shout about it at every turn, but her close friends as well as Bill knew about it. It turned out that at the beginning of the relationship, she honestly confessed everything to Lonaway. Because of her large income, she did not want to stop working and considered it a mere formality. However, it wasn't. Her occupation could turn against her and attract dangerous clients. It was quite possible that the men who broke into her house were related to this. The CCTV images of the men were later released to the public, but due to the poor quality of the images, their release was not positive. First suspect. Clarification in the investigation came after the wanted subscriber was identified. He turned out to be a 30-year-old resident of North Carolina named Adam Carey. It turned out that the man is a former military man with special training, was convicted, currently working in a private security organization. In fact, he was a real mercenary and a killing machine. Remarkably, Adam's photo matched the man's face that Holly's camera captured. Detectives got into his background and found out that he's a pretty nasty character. He had previously served a 4-month sentence for impersonating a police officer. During the search in his apartment were found weapons, silencers, and telescopic sights, components of explosives, flashbang grenades. Curiously, he got off with a laughable sentence for possession of such a large amount of dangerous weapons, which means he had strong support and protection. It took investigators a lot of work to figure out the connection between Holly, her ex-boyfriend, and the mercenary. Since Adam was proficient in all kinds of weapons and fighting techniques, His job was to carry out serious assignments and guard dignitaries. After he came to the attention of the police, it was decided to bring the man in for questioning. For a long time, they could not get anything substantial out of him. Eventually, he was detained and given time to think about the situation. In the meantime, the investigators turned their attention to another figure who had surfaced as a result of examining the victim's contacts. There was someone else of interest among them. Lovers. Holly's hot fan turned out to be Eric Charles Mon, owner of Mon Toyota car dealership out of Austin, Texas. All in all, quite a famous person. For everyone around him, Mr. Mon was a model family man and father. In fact, he had weaknesses peculiar to many men, extramarital affairs on the side. The businessman often came to Nashville to visit his son, studying at a local college. At the same time, he was satisfying his secret desires. One day he met Holly, who impressed him with her appearance. They began to see each other periodically. On February 3, 2020, Eric, using an alias, contacted Holly by email. He said that he would soon be in town and hoped to meet him. A few days later, he again reminded me of himself. The next letter said, "Good morning, beautiful. I'm looking forward to today. I'm in Nashville. I'll meet you at the bar like last time. Text me when you get there." Apparently, the date went as arranged. However, on March 1st, he received several threatening messages. The unknown person blackmailed him that if he did not receive $25,000 for his silence, he would tell his wife about the secret connection, ruin his reputation and family. Naturally, this state of affairs did not suit the man, except he didn't realize who was really behind the correspondence. A private security agency. It is known that after that, Eric Charles Mon turned to his 47-year-old acquaintance whose name was Gilad Peled. Gilad was consulting for a dealership to solve the parking lot homelessness problem and had a private security agency where, by a strange coincidence, the arrested Adam Carey worked. All that is known about the owner of the firm is that he organized his business after returning to Texas from Israel, where he had been living for some time. However, his company was not going through the best of times. The reason for this was the fact that the citizens of Texas have the ability to defend themselves independently and carry weapons. Despite this, there were still orders, but the security services were not very popular. Therefore, when Gilead was approached by Eric, the owner of the company was happy to get such a well-known and profitable client. A few weeks later, just after the murder of Holly and Bill, Eric left a positive comment on the site where private security companies are registered. At first glance, his comment contained nothing unusual. Eric praised the work done by Gilead's staff and was pleased with the result. There seemed to be a real breakthrough in the investigation. There was a connection between the murdered men, the suspect, and the wealthy businessman. The only thing left to do was to get Adam to talk and unravel this tangle of secrets. Mercenaries. The detectives warned Adam Carey that keeping quiet was useless. It would only get worse. Slowly, he began to talk and explain that Eric Mon had been outed to his boss. Eric complained of harassment and extortion, suspected his mistress, and asked him to look into it. For these purposes, Gilad Peled turned to Adam and his 46-year-old partner, Brian Brockway, from Austin. The latter also happened to be an ex-military infantryman capable of performing combat missions. Initially, they were required to find out the sender of the messages and intimidate him. Adam reported everything to Gilad, as evidenced by the Discovered Progress report, which resembled mostly military reports. The surveillance revealed that the man who had threatened the customer was Bill Lonaway. Holly had no idea what was going on behind her back. After the breakup, the former boyfriend was very angry and decided to set her up, and at the same time to get rich. He found out about the relationship between Holly and Eric Mon and started texting him under an assumed name. When the truth came out, the monitors reported everything to the management. However, their mission was soon adjusted. Among the instructions was to silence unwanted witnesses to the affair by any means necessary. Eric Mon was terrified because after it became clear that the extortionist is Bill Lonaway, Bill again claimed to be the one. On March 11th, Eric's house received a phone call. If his wife picked up the phone, his secret would be revealed and the most famous family in Austin would be ruined. Gilad proposed to the customer of his services to deal with the stalker and at the same time to deal with the girl according to the laws of Hollywood action movies. He agreed and offered $750,000 for the job. Holly and Bill's days were numbered. Order. On March 12, 2020, Holly and her ex-boyfriend were seen leaving the house together. The couple then proceeded to the parking lot and got into a car. Apparently, they decided to drive somewhere for a while as they did not bring any belongings with them. Since the young people were being followed, they were quickly intercepted by an armed Adam and Brian. Bill and Holly were kidnapped. Their vehicle was then moved to a construction site on Old Hickory Boulevard. They were shot at the site, after which they left their bodies in the car and dumped down an embankment. In the hours that followed, the mercenaries worked to remove evidence and connections to the crime. They also recovered the car they had rented for the monstrous mission. After the deed was done, the trio dispersed in different directions. The order was fulfilled. However, the mercenaries left a legacy. Eric Mond had set himself up and clearly rushed to a positive review. Arrests. After Adam Carey, Brian Broquet, and Gilad Peled were arrested, the detectives went on the sly. They wanted to catch the customer red-handed, so they asked one of them to contact him and make up a story. Gilad called Eric and said that one of his partners learned about what had happened and demanded to enter the share. The head of the security agency offered to get rid of him, the same way he had done with Holly and Bill. Despite the fact that Eric Mond was very angry, he agreed to commit another massacre. He didn't care how many people died. The main thing for him was to keep the secret and feel safe. On December 10, 2021, the famous businessman was detained. All four were charged with contract murder. Of all the accused, only Eric repented of what he had done. The rest of the mercenaries did not express the slightest regret. Before Gilad and Brian were arrested, they had been bugged. The men joked that the couple killed got off easy. During the interrogations, the customer tried to turn the tables on the perpetrators. Allegedly, they misunderstood the task, and he only wanted to get the extortionist out and scare. However, when the detectives presented evidence of his involvement in the crime, he confessed to everything and confirmed the criminal conspiracy. Justice. In November 2023, court hearings began and lasted 2 weeks. It was established that the black plot took place in early March 2020. Transactions between the defendants proved the withdrawals and transfers of money. On March 5th, Eric paid Gilad $15,000 as an advance payment. The manager of the security company was responsible for each employee's bank account. On March 9th, Holly and Bill were placed under surveillance. 3 days later, Mond wired another $150,000. This became a kind of signal to start the operation. After the order was completed, the participants in the crime received the balance. Cumulatively, in March 2023, $750,000 came from the famous car dealer. It took the jury 7 hours to reach a verdict. On November 17th, Brian and Adam were found guilty of contract murder resulting in death, as well as conspiracy to commit kidnapping and kidnapping resulting in death. Peled was also found guilty of the charges. Prior to trial, he entered into a plea agreement against his co-defendants. On November 30th of the same year, justice also caught up with Eric Mond. He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder for hire, but not guilty of kidnapping resulting in death. All the defendants were sentenced to life in prison without parole. The businessman's legal team announced plans to appeal the sole conviction that remained following the trial. After the verdict, the prosecution expressed satisfaction with the sentence handed down by the court. The lead detective in the case shared a sense of closure, stating that justice had been served now that the perpetrators were identified, brought to trial, and appropriately punished. Still, he acknowledged that no verdict could ever truly mend the loss suffered by the victims' loved ones. Their families never deserved such heartbreak, and neither Holly nor Bill deserved to die, he stated. Sadly, this case stands as a stark reminder of how life can turn both unpredictable and tragic. Holly, caught in a web spun by her ex-boyfriend and his dangerous associates, was an unwitting victim. Illicit passion carries consequences, and dirty money always comes at a cost. As for Bill, despite his faults, he, too, didn't deserve the fate he met. Ironically, through his own choices, he sealed not only Holly's fate, but his own as well. Moving on to the next case. Jana Murray. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple robbery, but as investigators looked further, a far more chilling reality emerged. This is the harrowing case known as the Lululemon murder. We're often taught to help those in distress, yet our actions don't always align with that principle. Employees at the Apple store, located next to a Lululemon Athletica outlet, heard a woman screaming in panic but chose not to intervene. Unbeknownst to them, those desperate cries were coming from a woman being assaulted by a violent criminal. The following day, news of Jana Murray's brutal and tragic death spread quickly. But this case was far from straightforward. What motivated the attack? Why was Jana targeted? Had she done something to provoke such a cruel act? Her story is unsettling, mysterious, and difficult to comprehend. Born on November 22, 1980, in Wichita, Kansas, Jana was the daughter of David Murray and Phyllis Roslian. As she grew older, she developed a deep thirst for adventure. Throughout her life, she volunteered regularly and had a strong passion for both animals and dance. Jana's family and friends described her as someone with a radiant smile and a vibrant spirit. She had a deep love for travel and adventure. Of all the places she dreamed of visiting, Antarctica was the only one left on her list. Her adventurous nature was clear even in her youth. On her 30th birthday, she recorded herself bungee jumping. Alongside her thrill-seeking side, Jana was also dedicated to her studies, excelling academically and earning a scholarship to study in Madrid, Spain. Jana spent 2 years studying at St. Louis University before earning her Bachelor of Science degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. However, her academic journey didn't end there. Driven to achieve more, she went on to pursue a double master's degree in communication and business administration at Johns Hopkins University, also in D.C. During her studies, she wrote her master's thesis on Lululemon Athletica, a premium yoga and athletic wear brand, making it fitting that she eventually secured a job with the company. Lululemon was impressed by Jana's strong business skills and prior work experience, leading to her being hired immediately. In 2011, she took on the role of sales team leader at the Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland. At the same time, she was nearing completion of her second master's degree. Jana was also in a steady relationship with her longtime boyfriend, Fraser Bosell, who was secretly shopping for engagement rings, preparing to propose. Life seemed to be falling perfectly into place for Jana. She had a fulfilling career, academic success, and was on the brink of starting a new chapter with the man she loved. Tragically, Jana would never get the chance to say yes to Fraser. On March 11, 2011, events took a horrifying turn. The next morning, on March 12th, Rachel, the manager of the Lululemon store, arrived just before 8 a.m. to open up and prepare for the day. Bethesda, Maryland, was considered a safe community, but when she reached the store, she was stunned to find the front door already open. The moment Rachel stepped inside, it was clear that something was terribly wrong. The store was in complete disarray. The scene inside the store was even more horrifying. Mannequins and clothing were scattered everywhere, and blood covered the floors, walls, and even the ceiling. As Rachel tried to make sense of the chaos, she suddenly heard a faint moaning sound, as if someone was injured. Overwhelmed by fear, shock, and disbelief, she ran out of the store in a panic. A man named Ryan, who was waiting nearby, noticed how distressed she looked and offered to go inside with her to see what was going on. Together, they re-entered the store, and Ryan made his way to the back area, where the office, fitting rooms, restrooms, and emergency exit were located. The floor was marked with bloody footprints, but nothing could have prepared Ryan for what he was about to find next. In the office, Ryan discovered a woman with long blonde hair lying face down. It was a disturbing sight that left him momentarily stunned. Then he heard another moan coming from the bathroom. Inside, he found a second woman, injured, with her hands and feet bound by zip ties, but she was still alive. Thankfully, he acted quickly and instructed Rachel, who was still near the entrance, to call 911. Emergency responders arrived shortly after and were met with the horrifying scene inside the store. Their immediate priority was to identify the two women involved. Tragically, the woman found dead was identified as 30-year-old Jana Murray. The survivor was 28-year-old Brittany Norwood, a fellow sales associate who had transferred to the Bethesda location from a Georgetown store just 6 weeks earlier. Brittany was injured, with wounds on her legs, arms, abdomen, and face, and her hands and feet were restrained with zip ties. Investigators initially believed that both women had been assaulted, as their pants appeared to have been deliberately slashed. Brittany was rushed to a nearby hospital in Bethesda, physically alive but emotionally shattered by the ordeal. To protect the store while Brittany was being treated at the hospital, police taped it off and took a better look at Jayna. It would be too mild to say that it was a violent scene. Jayna had almost 331 cuts, and more than half of them were on her face and chest. There were 6 different guns lying around the store that did the harm. There was a hammer, a box cutter, a wrench, and a knife in the group of tools that looked like they came from a Lululemon toolbox. A ligature was tied around Jayna's neck. It wasn't so tight that it looked like it had been used against her, but it was still strange. An autopsy was done on Jayna's body to find out how she died, and her parents and boyfriend were told about her sudden and sad death. It's not even close to enough to say how deeply moved this made them. The man who was going to marry Jayna was more than just heartbroken. There were over 100 different defensive cuts on Jayna's body, which showed that she had fought for her life. It was the wound on the back of her neck that killed her. Since the trail she left went to the back door of the store, it looked like she had tried to get away from the attack and was still alive for most of it. There was even blood on the handle of the emergency door, and a key that only Jayna had was stuck in the door. Additionally, the attack lasted around 20 minutes. It is so upsetting to think that this young woman lived through the whole thing. It doesn't make sense. The cops had to act quickly because they wanted to catch the person who had attacked Jayna and Brittany so badly. But there were some problems that got in the way. It was impossible to tell who got into Lululemon because they didn't have any security cams outside. It seems like the brand isn't being very careful with this. If someone stole something from the store, wouldn't you want to try to catch their license plate as they drove off? Police looked at video from the night before because that was the only camera nearby, and it was in front of the Apple store. At the time that Brittany and Jayna were supposedly attacked, police did see 2 men in dark clothes, walking on the sidewalk, probably heading towards Lululemon. However, because the camera was far from the store, they weren't sure if those men had anything to do with Jayna's death or Brittany's injuries. The cops took note of this fact, but they had to ask Brittany, who was the only person who had survived, what had happened the night before. Detective Deanna Mackey from the Montgomery County Police Department went to see Brittany the same day. She was healing well, because most of her injuries were on the surface. Brittany finally told Detective Mackey what was going on, even though she had been clearly uncomfortable with being touched. Brittany said that she and Jayna worked the closing shift on March 11, 2011, around 9 p.m. In general, Brittany took the train to and from work, while Jayna drove her car. The women shut down the store and went their separate ways. Brittany found out that she had left her Metro card at the store when she got to the train stop. She called another worker in the store right away to try to get Jane's number since that worker had the store's keys. Brittany called Jane and told her what was going on as soon as she got it. Jane turned around and went back to the shop to help Brittany get her Metro card back, even though she was almost home. When the 2 women got to Lululemon, Jane parked her car right outside the store, because she thought she would only be there for a short time. At 10:05 p.m., Jayna unlocked the door with Brittany following behind. 2 men in ski masks, gloves, and all black clothes pushed them in. Detective Mackey thought that the men who attacked were the same ones who could be seen walking on CTV around the time of the attack. Brittany thought they were thieves who would leave them alone after they emptied the cash machines. But things went very badly wrong. Brittany went on to describe the people who attacked. The 2 guys, one taller than the other, were probably in their mid-20s, and she thought they were white. The shorter guy hit Brittany, and the bigger guy grabbed Jayna. After putting the women down, they told Brittany that they knew where she lived. Brittany had utility bills in her purse that had her address on them, so it's clear where the thieves got the information. She also had her ID with her, which would have also shown her home. When Brittany heard this, she looked really scared. She then said that their trousers were torn and that they had been raped while being attacked and called racist slurs. She heard Jayna scream and cry too, but she couldn't do anything about it. Jayna finally stopped talking and Brittany knew that she had died. Brittany was scared when she heard Jayna's silence. She was sure that the same thing would happen to her again. It was just as she was getting ready for the worst that the attackers offered to spare her life. Why? She was said to be fun to take advantage of. The bad people who did this to Brittany tied her up, took the money, and then left her in one of the bathrooms where she was later found. Brittany was completely and utterly traumatized during her session with Detective Mackey. The conversation had to end so that the crime scene could be searched for forensic evidence that could help find the DNA of the 2 attackers. During this time, the police chose to follow Brittany's lead. They set up a watch in front of the Lululemon store and questioned the two mysterious men who were dressed in black. But soon after this meeting, the police ran into trouble. The two men worked as waiters at a nearby restaurant. Since they both lived in the same area, they took the same route home every day. What about their dark clothes, though? The two men were seen walking down the same pavement every day, as seen on a lot of CCTV video from nights before that, around the same time. They were dressed as waiters, so the black clothes were appropriate. Additionally, they had strong denials at the time of Jana's attack, and they were even ready to give their DNA and shoe prints to help with the investigation. This whole bunch of evidence was sent to be matched up with pictures of the crime scene. On March 16, 2011, Brittany was asked to come in for another interview to find out more. During the conversation, the police asked the people what kind of car Jana drove. Brittany gave a negative answer and was let go home after some simple questions. Brittany's brothers called the police the next day to say that Brittany had something to say about the car. People who knew Brittany said she was afraid to say more about the car because she thought the attacks would come after her again. The next day, on March 18th, Brittany was called in for another interview. This time she admitted that she knew what Jane's car looked like because the thieves made her move it. The attackers told Brittany to move Jane's car away from the store before they attacked her. She was told that she was being watched and that she would be killed if she didn't come back right away. Brittany was moving Jana's car by herself when she saw a police officer on watch. She didn't stop him because she was afraid of being caught because the thieves knew where she lived. The cops started to think that Brittany was telling them the truth, which was strange. Do you remember the claim of abuse and how both Jana and Brittany had their trousers slashed? Finally, after 6 days of investigations, the forensic reports came back. What they showed was amazing. The story said that neither of the women had been abused. As proof was being looked for at the crime scene, only DNA from Jana and Brittany was found all over the place. There was no male DNA at the crime scene, on Jana or on Brittany. The two workers' DNA wasn't found in the store or on the women, which took them off the list of possible suspects. What the tracks also said about Brittany's story was very interesting. To begin, the tracks were only found inside the store. If the thieves came from the outside, their tracks would have been seen outside the store as well. There was nothing, though. There is only one possible way to explain this strange message. Either the attackers changed their shoes before leaving, which is very inconvenient and not required, or the person who did this horrible crime was inside the store the whole time. The interesting thing is that the smaller tracks found at the scene matched Brittany's shoes, while the bigger print belonged to a US size 14 shoe. This could have been one of the attackers' shoes. The cops were still looking, though. They checked the bigger footprints against the ones the waiters said they saw on the CCTV video, but they didn't match. It turned out that the bigger footprint belonged to a store-owned size 14 shoe, which was found during the search. This little thing was strange. Even if Brittany was telling the truth and two men did attack them, why would they change their shoes and put on store-bought ones? It's just very strange. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Apple store next door heard noises coming from Lululemon around 10:30 p.m. on the night of the attack. The workers and the security guard, Ricardo, could clearly hear two women arguing. One of the women kept saying, "Oh my God, talk to me. Do not do this. What's going on? Talk to me, please." After that, they heard a fight, some banging and strange sounds like something was being pulled. They never heard a man's voice during that whole time. Not only was that scary, but after all that noise, a weak voice said, "God help me, please help me." What made it even worse was that the people who worked at the Apple store thought it was store drama and did nothing to stop it. Maybe Jana could have been saved if they had called the cops right away, but they didn't. And they didn't know that Jana was on the other side of the wall fighting for her life. Anyway, after all they found, the police knew Brittany wasn't giving them the whole story because her story didn't match what happened at the crime scene. When detectives looked into it, they couldn't help but wonder why Brittany would lie about being raped. What did she hide? Was there really a threat to Brittany? Or was it she who was dangerous? One strange thing about Brittany that keeps coming up when you look into her past is that she had sticky fingers. Brittany often stole from stores when she was in college. People who worked with Brittany, lived with her, and even became friends said that money, makeup, and clothes would disappear when she was around. Brittany lost her scholarship and was kicked out of school when her friends reported her for kleptomania. By 2007, Brittany had moved to Maryland. She worked at a hotel until she was promoted to manager. That didn't last long either, though, because her boss found out she was stealing from them and fired her. Brittany wanted to teach people how to train people and open her own gym. In fact, her job at Lululemon was just a stopover on her way to starting or working at a gym, which was one of her dreams. It didn't look like Jaina and Brittany were close or had any problems with each other. They got along and worked together, but that was about it. What had happened on the night of March 11th, 2011 that caused Jaina's terrible death? Well, before the store closed, all of the workers had to go through a bag check. This was how Lululemon made sure their workers wouldn't steal. However, Jaina was in charge of checking Brittany's bag, and she was shocked by what she found. It made Jaina think that Brittany was stealing while she was on the clock because she found a pair of leggings with the tag still on them. Jaina called her boss to tell her about what happened, but she didn't say anything to Brittany. The boss told Jaina that Brittany would be taken care of tomorrow. Brittany must have heard about this and may have wanted Jaina to keep quiet, even though the act had already been done. At 9 p.m., when the store closed for the night, Brittany called Jaina back to say she needed to get her Metro card. The women may have talked for a while in the store, and Brittany may have begged Jaina not to report her for theft. Brittany didn't want to lose another job, so when Jaina stood her ground, it was the last blow. This probably led to a fight, and Brittany seemed to have no other choice but to kill Jaina so she wouldn't get caught stealing and fired from her job. Brittany was thought to have struck Jaina violently with the tools, while Jaina did everything she could to talk Brittany out of it and get away. On the other hand, Brittany moved Jaina's car out of sight after sadly killing her, leaving behind clues. A witness said that on March 11th, he saw Brittany sitting in the car. After going by the same spot again about an hour and a half later, she was still sitting there. Brittany is thought to have planned the whole robbery gone wrong story at this point. She then went back into the store wearing size 14 shoes and sacked it, leaving marks all over the place. After getting the cash, she and Jaina hid in one of the back rooms with the money. In the end, she hurt herself by cutting her face and body slightly, and then tying her own hands and feet together with zip ties. She then waited until Rachel and Ryan found the brutal scene the next morning. Brittany made this whole plan, and it's so scary to think about someone who would kill someone violently to avoid getting caught stealing. There was a death in the family because Brittany was going to lose her job. That same March 18th, 2011, just 7 days after the horrible attack on Jaina, Brittany was caught. But there was something wrong. They had to show that Brittany planned the whole thing because they wanted to give her a life sentence. The defense, on the other hand, wanted second-degree charges and a much lighter term. The case was tried in October 2011 in front of a jury of 6 men and 6 women. John McCarthy, the top prosecutor in Montgomery County, said that Brittany was a smart woman who always lied. He also tried to get the jury to sentence Brittany to life in prison by showing them a lot of proof and showing holes in her story. He said she was a danger to society. The defense, on the other hand, said that Brittany did kill Jaina, but it wasn't planned. Brittany apparently lost it and killed Jaina at that time. However, Brittany could have stopped at any time after she snapped out of it, but she chose to attack Jaina instead, who sadly was still alive at the very end. Jaina had even tried to get away and call for help. The violence of the crime itself is proof that it was planned ahead of time. The jury was the center of attention. They met for only 1 hour and came back with the decision that Brittany was guilty in the first degree. Brittany's sentencing took place in January 2012, and she was given a life term without the chance of parole. When Judge Robert Greenberg delivered Brittany Norwood's sentence, he described her actions as cold-blooded, premeditated, calculated, and malicious. He addressed Brittany directly, calling her behavior truly terrifying. The judge also criticized the Apple Store employees for what he described as callous indifference, noting that they may have ignored Jaina's desperate pleas for help. Brittany exhausted all her legal appeals by 2015 and remains incarcerated at the Maryland Correctional Institute for Women in Jessup. While her sentencing brought a measure of closure to Jaina's parents, David and Phyllis, and her brother Hugh, the pain of their loss remains. To honor Jaina's memory, the Murray family created a Facebook page where friends and loved ones can share stories celebrating her joyful, adventurous spirit. The purpose of the Facebook page is to inspire others to step outside their comfort zones and embrace life with the same joy and courage that Jaina did. There's no question that this case took a dark and heartbreaking turn. Jaina was a compassionate, generous woman who always went out of her way to support others. Tragically, it was someone she was trying to help who ultimately took her life. If Jaina made any mistake at all, it was refusing to back down, standing firm against wrongdoing, even if it meant paying the ultimate price. Moving on to the next case. Sophie Colomb, a university student, set out for class, but she never returned home. When police began their investigation, they quickly uncovered a series of chilling clues. Yet those early discoveries were just the beginning. By the time the case was finally solved, it had sent shockwaves not only across Australia but around the world, and its impact is still felt today. Sophie Colomb was born in 1993 in the quaint French village of Saint-Julien-Montigny, nestled in the Alps. She grew up surrounded by the mountains, alongside her parents and two older brothers. From a young age, Sophie had a deep love for music and played in the local village ensemble. She also harbored a strong desire to explore the world. After finishing school, she moved to Denmark to study international business, followed by an internship in Germany. Then, in 2013, she was accepted into a master's program at Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia. Sophie relocated to Australia with her boyfriend, and together they rented an apartment near Griffith University. But a year later, when his visa expired, he had to return to France. Sophie considered going back with him, but ultimately decided to stay and finish her final year of studies. To support herself, she juggled multiple part-time jobs, working as a waitress, doing cleaning gigs, and offering private French lessons. Despite her efforts, she couldn't afford to live alone, so she moved in with fellow students who were sharing a flat. On the morning of March 27, 2014, 21-year-old Sophie headed out for a full day of classes. Her schedule kept her on campus until late that evening. Throughout the day, she stayed in contact with her boyfriend, exchanging messages as usual. But later that evening, she suddenly stopped replying. By the following morning, when there was still no word from her, her boyfriend grew increasingly alarmed. After unsuccessfully trying to contact Sophie by phone, her boyfriend turned to the Brisbane Police Department's social media page, hoping for any information. That's when he came across a newly posted update. The police had shared photos of several pieces of women's jewelry, asking the public to help identify the owner. The moment he saw them, his heart dropped. He recognized the jewelry right away. They belonged to Sophie. He immediately called the Brisbane police and told them what he had seen. That's when authorities finally revealed what had happened. Earlier that morning, a homeless man who lived in a park near Sophie's apartment had contacted police. He reported seeing someone lying on a bench, covered in old newspapers as if trying to stay warm. At first, he thought it was just another person sleeping rough for the night, but when he got closer, saw it was a young woman. He tried to wake her, shook her shoulder, called out to her, but there was no response. That's when he noticed blood matted in her hair. He reached out to check for a pulse and felt nothing. Realizing she was dead, he immediately went to the police. Officers confirmed that the young woman had died and sent her body to medical examiners. The autopsy revealed a devastating head injury, the fatal blow with a heavy object. They also found numerous abrasions and confirmed that she'd been sexually assaulted. Investigators concluded she'd been attacked just a few yards from that bench and then dragged over and left there. Whoever did it had placed her on the bench and covered her with newspapers, likely hoping her body would go unnoticed. And in that park, it made sense. The area was a known hangout for the homeless, and seeing someone asleep on a bench was nothing unusual. If that's what the killer was counting on, it worked. According to medical experts, the attack happened the previous evening, but Sophie didn't die right away. She lived for several more hours. She remained on that bench until late into the night, slowly succumbing to her injuries. If someone had called for help, doctors might have been able to save her. But no one called. Most people, it seems, simply thought she was another homeless person asleep in the dark. Once police sent Sophie's boyfriend a photo of the victim, and he confirmed it was her, detectives threw everything they had into the investigation. One of their first priorities was to find her clothes and belongings, because when her body was discovered, she was wearing nothing but her jewelry. But after combing through the park and checking every nearby trash bin, they didn't find a single trace. Investigators then began piecing together Sophie's final day, step by step, to try and retrace her movements. Footage from a CCTV camera near her apartment showed her leaving that morning and boarding a bus to the university. She spent almost the entire day on campus, and at about 8:30 that evening, she headed home. By then, it had started raining. A classmate offered to give her a lift, but Sophie turned him down, saying she'd just take the bus. Cameras near the bus stops captured her getting on and later getting off at her usual stop. From there, she would have needed to walk across a bridge over the river to get home. But to reach that bridge, she first had to cut through the very same park where her body was later found. After that point, there was no more footage, nothing to show what happened next. Detectives turned to the public, hoping someone might have seen something that rainy night. But almost no one had been out in that weather, and that gave the killer the perfect chance to attack her in the middle of that tiny park without being seen. Police also asked the public to keep an eye out for any of Sophie's missing belongings. She'd been carrying a phone, a tablet, an umbrella, and her handbag. When none of those items turned up in the park, they brought in divers to search the river. Before long, the divers found an umbrella about a mile downstream. But even then, investigators couldn't say for sure if it belonged to Sophie. News of Sophie's murder immediately drew massive attention across the city, and for more than one reason. First, police openly admitted they couldn't rule out the possibility that the killer might strike again. And second, Sophie was the fourth international student murdered in Brisbane in just a few months. Even though those other cases were unrelated and the suspects in them had already been caught, people were starting to see a chilling pattern and the sense of unease kept growing. Meanwhile, detectives kept digging through surveillance footage near the park, combing through hours upon hours of video. Then, finally, they spotted someone. A man walking past the park both before and after the estimated time of Sophie's death. That time window had been narrowed down almost to the minute, based on Sophie's movements captured by other cameras. What really made him stand out wasn't just how often he appeared near the park. It was the fact that he never came forward, despite repeated public appeals asking anyone who'd been in the area that night to contact police. Even with the heavy rain, dozens of people reached out saying they'd passed through or nearby at some point. But this man's name never came up. Investigators tried to follow his trail. Cameras showed him entering a subway station near the park and riding a few stops. After that, though, the trail went cold. They suspected he might have been heading toward the train station near the airport, possibly to catch a train out of the city. Detectives went back to the park to speak with people who'd spent most of their time there, hoping someone might recognize the man from the footage. Before long, they found a witness who said he'd actually been drinking with that man on the night of the murder. According to him, the man's name was Ben, and he'd been staying at a homeless hostel a few miles from the park, on the other side of the river. That hostel already had a bad reputation. Many of the residents were recently released prisoners with nowhere else to go. Police headed over there and showed staff a photo of the man from the surveillance footage. They recognized him immediately and confirmed that he was indeed one of their residents, 25-year-old Benjamin Millward. The staff also mentioned something unsettling. They hadn't seen Benjamin since the night Sophie was killed. He'd simply vanished, leaving behind almost all of his belongings, as if he'd left in a hurry. All of this gave police every reason to dig deeper, and finding Benjamin quickly became their top priority. 8 days after the murder, they went public with his name and photo, asking anyone with information on his whereabouts to come forward. As detectives looked into his background, they discovered that Benjamin had quite a record. Back in 2012, he'd been released from prison, where he was serving time for assault. But soon after, he was arrested again for violating parole and only gained full freedom in 2013. On top of that, his record included theft, charges, and a string of lesser offenses. Investigators also learned something else while speaking with other hostel residents. One of them said that just hours before Sophie's murder, Benjamin had been heavily drunk and under the influence of drugs. Benjamin even admitted to him that he hadn't used in a long time, and the last time he did, things went badly. Another resident reported seeing Benjamin in the park around 5 p.m., taking another dose. After that, they went their separate ways because the resident wanted to get back to the hostel before it locked up at 9 p.m. Benjamin, however, never returned that night. That same resident later recalled spotting him outside the building around 11 p.m. after Sophie's murder and said Benjamin looked deeply unsettled, nervous, and was acting strangely. While police waited for leads on his whereabouts, Benjamin's relatives and acquaintances began reaching out. Every single one of them insisted they didn't believe he could be involved in a murder. His family said they hadn't heard from him since the day Sophie was killed, and they even went on TV pleading with him to come forward and clear his name. But Benjamin stayed silent, and detectives grew more and more convinced that he'd already left the city. They circulated his photo and details to other towns and states, hoping someone would spot him. Before long, they got a promising lead. Staff at a small hotel in a town called Ballina, located in another state, reported that a man matching Benjamin's description had stayed with them for a few days, but he was already gone. Police immediately alerted officers in nearby towns, warning them that Benjamin might be moving through the area. And soon enough, 2 officers in a coastal city called Coffs Harbour, just a few dozen miles from that hotel, noticed a man on the street in the middle of the night who looked just like him. They approached and asked, "Are you Benjamin?" And the man calmly replied, Yeah, you got me. Is this because of the internet?" He was immediately arrested and extradited back to Brisbane. Detectives took his DNA and it matched the skin particles found under Sophie's fingernails, finally and undeniably tying him to her murder. After Benjamin was placed in custody to await trial, his lawyer spoke to the media. He said his client was feeling overwhelmed by all the pressure surrounding the case, but otherwise he was doing fine. Once in court, Benjamin didn't try to deny what he'd done. During the proceedings, he admitted to the murder in front of the judge and even asked Sophie's family for forgiveness. But then he revealed a detail that left everyone in the courtroom stunned. According to him, after attacking and assaulting Sophie, he told her he was going to get help. Yet instead, he simply walked away, leaving her to die alone on that park bench in the pouring rain. Before fleeing the city, he also threw all of her belongings into the river. As for his motive, Benjamin claimed that he hadn't been in control of himself, blaming everything on the drugs he said he barely remembered the attack at all, recalling only fragments of what he'd done to her. However, experts cast serious doubt on Benjamin's claims. They explained that the substances he'd taken on the day of the murder typically don't drive someone to commit a crime this violent, and certainly not something so calculated. His condition, they said, couldn't be used as an excuse. On top of that, the drugs wouldn't normally cause such severe memory loss. Yet Benjamin insisted he could barely remember anything. And, as investigators pointed out, he'd been clear-headed enough to buy train tickets and leave the city without drawing attention to himself. In the end, the court sentenced Benjamin to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 20 years. He was also sentenced to an additional 15 years for the sexual assault, to be served concurrently. This means that, due to his age, Benjamin could potentially be released before he turns 50. Following the trial, his mother spoke publicly, commending her son for owning up to his actions. She placed the blame on drug use, claiming he never would have committed such a crime if he had been sober. Although the investigation wrapped up relatively quickly, the impact of Sophie's murder continued to reverberate throughout Brisbane. In its aftermath, residents demanded improved safety measures in the park and criticized the hostel for allowing anyone to stay there, including individuals with violent criminal histories and recent prison releases. Many women came forward to share their experiences of being harassed in the same park, noting that they had never seen a police presence there. Vigils were held across the city in Sophie's memory. More than 2,000 people participated in a candlelight march, retracing the path Sophie was supposed to walk home that night. Her funeral was held in her hometown in France and was attended by nearly 1,200 people, an extraordinary turnout for a village of just 1,500 residents. It was the largest funeral the town had witnessed in decades, second only to the passing of a long-loved mayor. So many came to offer their sympathies that mourners filled 8 condolence books in total. Moving on to the next case. Susan Eads. Susan Eads was a 20-year-old aspiring model from Texas who worked as a waitress in 1983. She held jobs at the Prickly Pear Bar and part-time at Charlie's Bar. One night in August of that year, after finishing work early, she went to Jason's club, where she was last seen. During the evening, an unknown man asked her to dance, but she declined. The last confirmed sighting of Susan was when she left the club. The next day, her body was discovered in an empty lot on Nassau Road 1 in Seabrook, Texas. Investigators determined that she had been strangled with the bodysuit she had worn that night. Her 1976 Chevrolet Monte Carlo was found parked near the Gulf States Yachts Boat Store, not far from where her body was located. 2 items she had been wearing, a Clear Lake High School class ring and a gold necklace, were missing. Police launched an investigation, collecting DNA evidence from her jumpsuit and interviewing witnesses from Jason's club. Several people mentioned the unidentified man who had approached Susan. Based on their accounts, Seabrook police released a composite sketch of him. While they couldn't confirm his involvement, he remained their only potential lead. Then, unexpectedly, a strange man began calling Susan's mother. At first, he said nothing during the calls, but eventually, he started speaking. He claimed to have photographs of Susan, prompting the police to begin recording the calls in hopes of identifying him. He even offered to show them to her mother. He claimed his name was Paul, and he lived in Houston on Telephone Road. This man always hung up before police could trace the call. He also never followed through with his plans to show the photos. A language expert were used to see if he could find anything of interest. The language expert could determine that his accent is Southern, but that it not really narrowed down at all. It is not known if this man was actually involved or if he was just someone had read about the case in a local newspaper. After this, the police had nothing else to go on, and the case soon went cold. In 2017, investigators looked into the case once more. They came across a man by the name of Anthony Shore. He lived in the area where Susan was found back in 1983. In 2017, when investigators took a closer look, he was in prison. Anthony had a long list of victims, whose lives he took in a similar fashion to how Susan lost her life. Using the DNA samples they retrieved back in 1983, Anthony was ruled out. However, investigators were not able to match the DNA to anyone on their database. It did give the investigators an idea, though. They decided to contact the FBI and genealogists. The next few months were spent comparing the DNA sample to online ancestry profiles. Finally, a match came back to a distant relative of the suspect. The relative was a young child at the time of the crime. The relative was very helpful, and after some more testing, the investigators believed they had their man, Arthur Ray Davis. He was the 35-year-old Vietnam veteran and local boat captain. Davis matched the composite sketch almost perfectly. Both had a cowboy hat, hair that falls over the ears, a mustache that hangs past the sides of the lips, high cheekbones, and a pronounced chin. Investigators couldn't question Davis, as he had died in a car crash just 4 months after taking Susan's life. Strangely, the accident occurred less than a mile from where her body was found. While identifying Davis brought resolution, law enforcement is still searching for answers about his motive. They're urging anyone with relevant information to come forward. Texas Ranger Brandon Bess emphasized that someone out there must have known Davis, who he was, and what he was like, particularly in August 1983. Recently, Susan Eads' family and investigators gathered at her grave, placing roses in her memory. Although there was no trial or conviction, the family finds peace in knowing who was responsible. Still, they hope to one day understand why Davis did what he did. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.